to the show, Miss Arp. It's so good to see you again.
Thank you so much. It's good to see you. And yeah, can't believe it's more than 2 years ago that we last spoke. But yeah, good to be back.
Yeah, well, tell us what happened or what has happened with NEBOSH since our 2021 interview back then.
Wow, a lot, Jordan. So I think when we spoke last, we were like the rest of the world facing the lockdown challenges and all the issues that brought, the challenge of the pandemic. And it's always timely, I think, to remember those that were lost to the pandemic and the family and friends that are still dealing with that. So our hearts always go out to them. I mean, certainly at NEBOSH, we are still dealing with those post-pandemic challenges. I think, crikey, since we last spoke, like many organisations, our staff really started a very slow and careful return to the office space. Because again, I think when we spoke 2021, all of our people were working at home and still under certain lockdown restrictions. So we're now in a hybrid or an agile working space. So absolutely recognising that people performed really well in that home space. They really valued having the agility of that, the choice to come back into the workspace now that's open again. So yeah, we had 2 buildings pre-pandemic. We just have 1 now. So never are all our staff in the office at the same time. But that works really well, depending on what people are doing. Some can perform better at home. Some prefer the office space now to come in and have that interaction, or when they're training or supporting each other. So yeah, some real value has come about with that. So we've returned to the office space. I think the other key thing we spoke about was our sort of crisis response to the pandemic when we were together in 2021, and the fact that 2020, the majority of our assessments were taken in invigilated examination halls, traditional pen and paper, and we'd made that huge change to open book examinations. So our first one was back in August 2020, so we were still very new in introducing our open book examinations. The response to that has been amazing. It really got us through the challenges of the pandemic. Registrations were not only maintained, but they've really, thrived and increased. So yeah, the open book examination has been fabulous for us. And we were rewarded with the Federation of Awarding Bodies Awarding Body of the Year a couple of years ago. And also we won an E-Assessment Association Award as well on the back of that assessment. So yeah, so much has happened. And I must as well welcome our new Chief Executive, Andy Shenstone. So he's been with us about 3 months now, and it's great to have him on board. He brings super amount of experience in higher education. He's passionate about EDI, passionate about social purpose, and really engaged in the whole quality piece in everything that we do. And we've also just in the last few days announced our new chairman as well, which is a gentleman called Rob Hull, and he'll be working with Andy on leading the organisation. And again, Rob comes from a training and education background and committed to educational excellence.
Wow. So you're growing as well, expanding as well.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, I mean, I mentioned all the positives about the open book examination, which are many. It's allowed us to assess in a much more valid and reliable way. However, the challenge it's presented, because there's always 2 sides to the story, is malpractice. So because it is an open book examination, it's made it easier in some ways for the non-authentic learners to access that assessment without the commitment to the learning that's intended to go before it. So, as listeners will be aware, NEBOSH is committed to putting learners in workplaces around the world that have the learning and the qualifications to make a difference. And what we're finding with some of the challenges of malpractice is learners will just try and circumvent that learning, gain the assessment by non-authentic means, and then they're in workplaces without the learning. So we have, no questions asked, a zero tolerance to malpractice. And since particularly the introduction of the open book examination, we've really increased the measures that we've put in place to proactively prevent malpractice and the reactive measures to find it if it does happen. And we part company with learning partners if they've been complicit in malpractice, and we'll ban learners from taking any future assessments if they've been engaged in malpractice. So yeah, so that challenge continues. Malpractice has always been with us, but it just changes in its shape and form, and we're continually trying to work to address that. So yeah, that's an ongoing challenge for us.
Yeah, gone are the days when the students used to write on their hands all the answers on the hands, and then they're looking like this when they're doing their notes.
You're so right. And you know what? Some of the innovative and creative ways that some of these learners find to, like you say, to cheat, if only they put that energy into the learning, I'm sure they'd come out with distinctions anyway. It's a shame, but we do recognize that in a lot of areas of the world, the qualifications are high stakes. It gets them jobs, it gets them income to feed the family. So we do have empathy, we understand, but we're so committed to reaching those learners and helping them understand that they can get the same outcome by learning and gaining their qualification by authentic means.
I've seen so many different ways of doing certifications through NEBOSH with your just extensive web of network providers. And I've seen a bunch of them where you could take the course first and then you could get the certificate afterwards. So basically, it's no pressure to get the learning. And then at the very end, when you're ready to get certified, that's the payment process, but you get the learning for free. Is that a model that you've seen of, and has it worked?
It does work. We also recognize that learners have different learning styles. And like you say, we do have an extensive network of learning providers that offer different types of learning. They had to adapt and change in the pandemic as well. So many now offer online learning or a mixture. They do blended learning, some face-to-face and some online tuition. But I think, the model that works is the one where the relevant time for each learner is taken to teach them the content of that course, of that qualification. And another change that we've made in the last few years, children, is to really emphasize the importance of formative assessment. So preparing the learner for those endpoint assessments, checking in where they are on the learning journey, making sure that they understand where they are, and giving feedback and engaging the learner in that process, giving them ownership for the learning as well. So it's very much that partnership approach. The more the learner and the learning partners can work together and work out what is the best route to that final point assessment to get the most engaged understanding, the better the outcome is going to be in terms of a successful assessment, but also the knowledge and understanding that is then taken on into the workplaces.
Wow, and you're in that space because you are truly been like, even when your row spa days, and getting where you're creating courses and you're trained in this. So you must really get a kick out of seeing this transaction or transformation of how higher education and learning is catching up with the safety career. We never had that in safety. Before, it was just you got injured, then you're in safety. So you got injured, now you're working in safety. Now, NEBOSH and the way that you guys have made it so you used all the learning and instructional designing in such a way that it's easy for learners to learn throughout the globe. And I like the way that you guys have partnerships with people that doesn't seem like they can understand the safety and health by when you look into their world and you see like electrical cords everywhere.
Yeah, it's a passion of mine. Back in the days with Rossborough, it was the same purpose, to keep people safe and well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. When I started in health and safety, it wasn't because I chose to do it. I came at it from a different route, and there are so many of my peers that are exactly the same. They didn't choose a health and safety career; they ended up there. But yeah, increasingly so now, people are choosing health and safety. And again, I think the pandemic really elevated the profession. It connected professionals across the world. It showed the value of the profession. And I think the other thing that's happening is some colleagues in the arena, people like Kathy Seabrook, is talking about sustainability, and she talks about joining the dots. And I think now joining the dots is all about people and valuing people. So if you come at it from, psychological safety or mental health and well-being or sustainability or social impact, CSR, all of these things at the heart and at the core of everything is people and valuing people. So I think, the profession has been elevated and there's more connectivity between different professions who are recognizing, people matter. You can't achieve anything in this world unless you look after the people within it.
Well, you definitely have seen that with your organization and just the history of NEBOSH altogether. For us in the U.S., we don't know it as much as the global community, so we're used to designations driving us. We're always seeking the next designation, but it seems like you guys have not only very, very well sought at designations, but you also help people who want to, like me, myself, in the future, I'm going to do more. What's the process for someone who has the brain space to make new courses, to get it approved, and to actually partner with NEBOSH for new material?
Oh, that's a great question. It's something we're looking at right now as to what courses, what education is missing, and how can we best fill that. So, if somebody's got that sort of idea and some content, by all means, contact me, contact colleagues at NEBOSH, and we'll look into that. What we do need, like any organization, is the business case behind that. We need to be able to justify that there's an audience and what that content means. But we're always very happy to look at new content and the need for it.
Okay, so we just got to do the needs analysis and follow our ADDIE model to make sure.
Absolutely.
I just love talking to other instructional designers because you understand those things, right?
Yeah.
And another question. We talked about psychological risk. You mentioned it before. And I am now trying to catch up to ISO 45003. I see it as a consultant, and those listening to my show or people who are either consultants or playing the role as a consultant for their company. I know that's a need for psychological safety. It's just so hard to quantify it until ISO 45003 came out, and it gave like a nice good path to follow. Are you seeing the same thing globally? I know you travel everywhere and you you speak everywhere. Are you seeing the same thing where there's a big need for the psychological risk to be addressed?
Absolutely. And again, I think the pandemic has been instrumental in that. So, I don't need to tell the audience all the challenges that came with the pandemic and how that affected and impacted people's mental health and well-being globally, with furloughing and redundancies, the uncertainty, people losing loved ones. It really brought, psychological issues, mental health and well-being to the fore. And you look back historically, it's absolutely not new. I think the pandemic has given us that new impetus, and words like resilience are coming in more and more. But, our profession has always been committed to health and safety. I think it's fair to say that health has usually been the poor relation. There's been a much greater focus on safety globally. We've then seen increased attention being given to health with control of hazardous substances, for example, manual handling, this kind of thing. But when we talk about health, it's physical and psychological health. We need to look at the whole person. So I think the best way our profession needs to think of it is in the same way that physical risk is all about the possibility of physical injury from exposure to a hazard. Psychological risk is the possibility of psychological injury when exposed to a hazard. So this is the amazing thing, that our profession has got the skill set and the capacity and the capability to really help in this area. In the same way that we work to eliminate and reduce the risk of physical hazards, it's the same approach with psychological hazards. And as you quite rightly said, ISO 45003 gives some structure. It links to 45001. It puts it in a framework that is, beyond familiar to the health and safety practitioner.
With the just had another thought about that, because I know with pandemic in the US, we had a split way of addressing it, where some people didn't address it at all. And some people were, on the other end of the scale. But I know uh, the isolation and the feelings that everybody had during that time period has traveled over now. And then truly, there's still a lot of uh, workplaces that aren't addressing other psychological risks, such as uh, I've got a good friend who's transgender. So as I'm talking to him through an episode, he was telling me truly when he's going through his transition period, his company supported him throughout everything, and it was really a, a, a good testament that you can have a partnership with companies. But there's some male dominated companies that would be, I don't know, what's a good way of saying that they might be intimidated by that. I don't know how to express it, but without the company properly protecting someone like my buddy Ari, or someone who truly feels like they can't express themselves at work or show pictures of their loved one in the office without getting bullied. Um, is this the same type of psychological safety that we're trying to deal with?
Absolutely, absolutely. And people need to feel psychologically safe in every aspect. So, yeah, I think you've raised a really good point. So, people are more comfortable about, I think more comfortable now generally talking about the mental health and well-being issues, and there's a breadth and a wealth of information out there. And I think most people now commit to the importance and the criticality of addressing these issues. But I think it's the tangible changes that we need to see. And by way of the example you gave there, some organizations are way ahead of others. And I think we can either be, at either end of the scale of that, we can either be encouraged or discouraged. But the way I see it, it's pouring light into the darkness. We need to be encouraged by and led by the people and the organizations that are making those changes. And I absolutely believe we keep pouring that light into the darkness and it'll flush the others out, or educate. It's the education, isn't it, that we need. But yeah, and I think, when you bring it back to the practitioners and those tangible tools, we understand how to identify, those psychological hazards. If it's an environmental one, we know that our well-being is affected by temperatures and noise and not having the right equipment in the environment. We know, going back to, stress management standards, with the HSC and other standards around the world, that people not having a say in the control of the work, not having support from the managers, perhaps being, bullied in organizations. These are the more tangible things that our profession, I think, is used to. But when we're dealing with the psychological hazards and the risk, we've got to put, as you've quite rightly said, then that personal layer over the top. We've got to understand in organizations what else have the individuals got going on, because we're talking about psychology and psychosocial. It's so individual. Who are the people that are going through those challenges that you've just described? Who are the people in the organization that are perhaps the prime carer for a family member? What else have they got going on in their day? Yeah, and in a nutshell, we can all contribute to that, whether we're a health and safety professional or not, by just showing up for each other. Just being kind and being there and showing up for each other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I honestly, I'm now coming to the terms, because I see it a lot as a consultant. I go into different organizations, and sometimes I see where a safety person is just literally like verbally abusing workers because they didn't follow certain standards. They're just, talking down to them about not following this standard, and they know better. But I have to come in this scene as almost I'm a third party looking for fresh eyes towards hazards. And now my eyes are open towards the psychological hazards as well. So I have to coach um, those moments when I see safety professionals almost like using safety as a weapon to their workers. It makes them pushes them away from safety and health, and it now will make them feel like they have to um, get back at the safety officer at their own demise. And it just makes no sense to me, but I see it all the time.
Yeah, and it's good that people like you are going in there and bringing about that change, because I guess what you've got to look at then is the culture within the organization. Why is the safety professional feeling that they've got no choice but to regulate it in such a formal way? You've got to look up then at the leadership within the organization. And I've done a lot of sessions recently on resilience. So what we're seeing is a lot of organizations are recognizing the importance of individuals and psychological safety and well-being, but they put all the effort into individual resilience. So there'll be the bowl of fruit and there'll be the gym membership, and the organization will be saying, it's so important. You must get work-life balance and you must take time for yourself. But the managers have got all these targets to reach. So the message they're giving their people is, you've got to do these 10 things before you leave today. So you've got to have organizational resilience as well. And this is where ISO 45003 is fabulous, because it's difference to 45001 is it talks about your primary, your secondary, and your tertiary controls. So the gym membership, the bowl of fruit, the mental health first aid is all fabulous, but they're at that tertiary level of control. What we need is those primary levels, that leadership commitment, the resources, the strategies, the secondary controls, the implementation to deliver that strategy, and then the backup of the tertiary. So, yeah, a great example that you give, Sheldon, but, what is the organizational structure in the organization that makes a safety professional feel they've just got to go in with a checklist and enforce? And I've always said, as a health and safety professional, we need to do things with people, not to them, because if they understand that you're asking them to do this particular thing because we value them, we want them to go home the full and rounded and intact, healthy and safe person that they arrive that day, and we want them to be safe for the family and friends. That's why we're doing it. Whereas I know it's in some organizations, the message is, you've got to do this because we want more out of you. We need things done quicker.
So funny, because that's like how I normally see people when I go into these organizations. And you're right, I'm judging the safety culture, and it starts from the moment I pull up. In most cases, I could see even at the gate when they say we've had X amount of days without an accident. In my brain, I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be a long day.
You've got a lot of work to do.
As soon as I see that sign, so many days without an accident, I'm like, oh, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the first things I do is I just kind of be quiet, and I look at the relationship with the employer to the employees. And if someone could say, hey boss, where's your hearing protection? And someone's like, oh yeah, good. And the boss is really receptive. I see that right away versus someone who gives them a glare. Yeah. I see organizations now, even the bosses are starting to understand that the old traditional Douglas McGregor X type of personality that says the workers are intentionally being just don't want to act like they're supposed to in this work atmosphere because that's what they want to do. I've seen so much more people get out of that and go into the why. For those of you listening, the Douglas McGregor has two theories of management. One is X, one is Y. Y is the person who believes that the people, the managed workers are there to have fun as well as to learn. They're self-paced, they're directed, and you're just there to get that group working together. Whereas the X people are, you got to do what I say when I say it. And that's
and that right there is the beauty and the simplicity of it. Yes, there is some challenges in that personal layer and identifying that the psychological hazards, but the simplicity of it is, we get better performance out of people if they feel safe and well. Yeah, we get better performance out of a person that is feeling psychologically safe and well. And again, somebody who feels psychologically safe is much more likely to tell the manager, tell the supervisor if there's a hazard or a risk that isn't being addressed. Whereas in a non-psychologically safe environment, people are not going to be open because they fear they're going to be judged or blamed. So there's the solutions are simple, and what the profession has known for many years, it's just getting those tangible actions and chipping away. As you well know, it's that patience and persistence and keep repeating that same message to bring about the change that we need.
So International Network of Safety and Health Practitioner.
Professional organizations, yeah.
And I get it all the time. I constantly have heard of you guys for forever, including, with the Singapore Accord back in 2016. If anyone's not aware of that, if you were a safety practitioner, the Singapore Accord kind of made a way for everyone to know these are the competencies you should have if you're going to have a practitioner level. And there's two different levels, practitioner and
Professional.
Professional. Thank you. So that's really, really a great organization. So congrats to that one.
Oh, thank you. It's a real pleasure and honor to be involved. So, as you said, the Singapore Accord was now some years ago. The world's changed. So we are currently looking and revisiting that competency framework and looking at the skill set again that today's health and safety practitioner needs. But yeah, it's a real honor, as I say, to be amongst that group. We've got representation from America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, Spain. And looking to build that membership and create a wider alliance. So we truly are, we've got that diversity and equity, recognizing that truly stronger together, and the more diverse membership we can get, the better we can serve our profession.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending this. Well, for me, it's my wife said, you're talking to someone from England on 4th of July in America. Isn't there something wrong with that?
It still fascinates me. I mean, again, before the lockdown, I would hardly ever do this. And when we have the Inchpo meeting, Sheldon, we meet, the exec meet once a month, and we're there connecting Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, UK, and it's amazing. It's amazing what the human being is capable of. So, yeah, there are challenges with health and safety and psychological safety, but we are truly stronger together, and we can nail it. And everybody I meet in this profession is amazing and passionate and committed. So, people like yourself, it's an absolute pleasure to connect and work with.
Oh, you're gonna make me blush.
Oh.
Well, tell everybody how to reach you and NEBOSH, and maybe I would love for you to tell us before you go, just for those who may not be familiar with what you guys do and what they could expect when they go on the NEBOSH, NEBOSH .org.uk.
Perfect. Yeah, so we are an England and Wales registered charity. So we're a not-for-profit charitable organisation, and we are predominantly an awarding body. So we are regulated by two regulators in the UK, in Scotland and in England, to deliver qualifications. And those qualifications all serve our charitable purpose, which is improving health, safety and wellbeing in workplaces around the world. And we do that by the learning journey and the assessments that form part of our qualifications. So what you can expect by connecting with us is, the links to those competency frameworks, core content that today's health and safety professional or other people in organizations need to make workplaces a healthier and safer and fun place, as you said, to work.
Yes, and they have diploma programs and everything else. I know we've got many different countries listening in, and honestly, there's probably an NEBOSH program for you, whatever country you're in. So
there is, and again, our diploma holders, which is like a degree level qualification. Above that, we do have a smaller number of master's programs, but our alumni are across the world. We have now more than 6,000 alumni members, and sitting under that, many thousands more of our certificate holders. So, our reach is broad. it is broad, and we know these people are doing amazing things in those organizations that they're now working in.
Oh yes, I hear only good from NEBOSH grads, and the way you guys work with IOSH and everything else. It's just a wonderful connection, and that's why I love to bring that to the U.S. too, because we sometimes we get a little myopic. I have to say that. We don't
Oh,
know.
and that's the beauty of INSPO. You know, we connect. So IOSH is in INSPO, ASSP, you know, the Canadian Professional Membership Board is, the Australians and so on. So it does it. It helps us, you know, create that diversity. And remember, we're not alone, you know, particularly, you know, so many of these challenges, whether it was the pandemic, whether it's psychological safety, whether it's mental health, we all have it. We all have mental health. We can all learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still, beating the drum to make sure that we get so many safety professionals into therapy and a few other things, because we got to get ourselves right before we could go out and reach everyone else. And if we're scared of it, then how can we add that to our wellness? Everyone's looking for employee assistance programs. A lot of those programs do have mental health counselors to help us, and there's a bunch of Better Health and a few other groups out there that are online. And I honestly tell people on the podcast and everything, you've got a part of yourself that really needs to come out, and that part of yourself could be considered spiritual, could be considered whatever you want, but it's truly a part of you that if you push it down too much, you're going to be unwell. And we're in the business of making people well.
That is just incredibly inspiring, Sheldon, and it's hit the whole nail on the head, because if people like you and me and other health and safety professional leaders can reach out and say, yeah, I have mental health and I've had these challenges and I've reached out for help, it is just beyond empowering. It creates that psychological safety. If the leaders in safety can be that open and acknowledge that, yeah, I've had these issues, it creates that psychological safety. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for being on the show. I don't know, every time I hear you, I just smile. You make me smile.
Oh, likewise. Well, you have a very lovely smile too. We're smiling together here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dee. And tell Zoe she is just legend. I just love me some Zoe. And so tell her thank you again.
I will. She's a legend. She's amazing. Thank you.
All right. Enjoy your
take care.
All right.
Thank you. Bye, Sheldon. Bye-bye.